Hi, this is JP Morgan. We're back here with Aijan to take a look at the Canon C200
versus the URSA Mini Pro G2.
I really want to look at these two compared to one another because I own a C200 and I want to see what the RAW looks like on this compared to the RAW on the URSA Mini Pro 2, just see how they compare with each other, because I'd love to buy a companion camera. I would probably sell this and buy two of the URSA Mini Pro 2s, but love to have two. I got to decide, should I buy another C200 or two of those? And there's some real compelling reasons to get that URSA Mini Pro 2. What are those, Kenneth?
I mean, first of all, I love the option to shoot a lot of different codecs at different levels of quality. So you can shoot compressed RAW on this, which is really great, or you can shoot ProRes of all different kinds of flavors. Whereas on the C200, you can only shoot RAW or really crappy 8-bit footage. So that's
crappy 8-bit footage. I love that. So let's look at the picture quality. Let's just see how the images look on these two cameras, because I think that's really what we want to see. I mean, there's some other options that are nice, but let's take a look at the picture quality. Well, I can see what I see automatically is a similar kind of thing that we saw with the Amira, and that is that in the greens, you just get a much richer, nicer looking green with the C200 than you do with the URSA Mini Pro 2 or G2, because it's just, I don't know, there's a pretty color. But it is interesting in their skin tones in that though. Well, I mean, it's a little cooler on the Blackmagic, a little warmer with the Canon, which shouldn't surprise anybody.
Yeah. And this was the same with the Amira, where the tonality in the skin didn't create as much contrast on the face for some reason. Yeah. You know, you look under her cheekbones, there just isn't as much shadow, which is really nice. It
is interesting though, when we compare the Amira, look at the blues in these two are more similar to each other. And in some ways, I think the URSA Mini is a little brighter and a little nicer in the blue, than the C200 is.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And the yellow too. The yellow's a little more pale.
Yeah, a little more pale. You don't get quite that vivid yellow like you're getting it with the URSA Mini G2, because there's some nice color things going on there.
All right, here we have our mixed lighting test, and what we did here is we wanted to make more of a nighttime scene. We have a warm source over top, and then really it's actually just window light that's being diffused and sort of somewhat blocked coming through the window in the background. The C200 it was harder to get kind of the contrast I wanted for this scene. I mean, it's not a bad look, but it doesn't look as much, kind of nighttime dark as the URSA Mini.
It feels like it just has kind of a color cast over the whole thing, whereas I think the URSA Mini looks better here. Definitely does.
I did use factory LUTs on this, and the Canon LUT has never really impressed me, and I kind of wish I had done a little more of a home-baked approach to this image, because I would have brought the shadows down. I would have kind of removed that cast a little bit.
Yeah. Although when you say that, I feel like with the G2, we're looking at just kind of this bluish cast on the left, a little bit of warmth on the right. Although it's giving us what we had there.
And it is a little bit crunchier too on the G2. Again, factory LUTs, they make a big difference.
So let's take a look at the dynamic range between these two cameras and just see how they hold the highlights, how they hold the shadows. Just see whether they like to be pushed or pulled, or, what's the latitude? What kind of latitude do you have when you're shooting? So this is normal exposure, and already I'm looking at it going, the C200, the grass in the background is awfully bright.
Yeah, it's very hot.
It's very hot, and whereas compared to the URSA Mini Pro G2, it just looks, it's holding that better.
We'll move to +1 stops overexposed. URSA Mini Pro 2 still holding up pretty well, though it seems like the sidewalk in the background is still a little it's getting a little too hot. The C200 looks kind of the same,
Hasn't changed much.
It's actually holding everything the way it was before. +2 stops. C200 still holding pretty good, getting a little bit hot on the concrete. URSA Mini is also doing well, but I feel like it's clipping harder.
Yeah.
I feel like the URSA Mini is clipping harder on the concrete, though they're looking really similar.
They're both clipping on that concrete, but our skin tone still feels fairly, I don't know. It's starting to feel a little rosy to me on the URSA Mini.
Yeah, I agree. There's a little bit of a shift. C200 feels very consistent across these. All right, +3 stops. URSA Mini Pro 2, definitely clipping hard in the background on the concrete and the leaves.
It's hitting pretty hard.
C200, the leaves aren't clipping as much. There's a little spot.
Yeah.
But
on the plant on the left there. Look at the color on the plant on the left, though. It's still a nice green, still holding that green, whereas the Ursa Mini is just kind of, it's yellows and shifted a little bit.
I feel like the C200 is holding on to things a little better, and the color is staying more consistent, whereas it's shifting magenta.
It's definitely shifting magenta.
On the Ursa Mini.
Ursa Mini, yeah.
All right, +4 stops. Lots of stuff clipping now.
Yeah, on both of my major clipping on the Ursa Mini. Look at that, the wall into the grass. You don't see any detail. It's just an L shape almost. All the foliage on the left, or all the foliage between the sidewalk and the wall is gone. But the C200, you're still holding on to a lot of that foliage.
It's shifting green in her skin tones, though.
It definitely is.
So starting to struggle a little bit, but the skin's still holding well. I mean, the skin is not quite it's not clipping on either camera, so that's impressive. Finally, +5 stops. Yeah, now both cameras have kind of lost it. I actually feel like the C200 took a giant leap for the worse here.
But it really did. The detail's kind of gone.
Just fell off the cliff. There's some Mini, you know, continuing, but they've kind of matched each other at this point, you know.
But look, it's interesting though. Look at the weeds, the transition between the wall and the grass or the sidewalk. You still see some detail in there with the C200. You see more detail in those leaves of the plant on the left that are you know, has the wall behind them. You know, whereas with the Ursa Mini, they're just gone.
So yeah, and it definitely an advantage, I think, in the C200. I'd say maybe a stop of highlight retention in the C200. That's kind of nice. So we had a bit of a mess up here on the underexposure test. The Canon C200, I think I forgot to dial back the ND, so we had 2 stops of ND in when we were shooting this. So we're going to show you the -1 and -2 stops with the Ursa Mini, and then we'll bring the C200 in at -3 stops.
So we don't have that footage at -1 and -2.
Yeah, unfortunately. But the Ursa Mini at -1 stop looks really nice. I don't really see any red flags, no noticeable noise.
No clipping, it looks
fine.
Yep.
At -2 stops, it does start to get a little bit crunchy around her hair and the shadows. You are seeing noise, more parts of the image, maybe in her dress. At -3 stops, definitely a lot of noise now in the image for the Ursa Mini Pro. In the shadows, at least. Maybe not so much in the highlights, you know.
No, but you see the dancing in the red dress.
Yeah.
You see it over on the wall, like on that left-hand side there.
-3 stops on the C200. You also are getting that noise in the wall. It seems to be a little more patterned. You can kind of see these lines in the wall. And then on the shadow side of her face, it's also pretty noisy.
Boy, in that red dress, it's really noisy.
Yeah, it's very noisy. I do think the color isn't getting pushed around as much with the C200. You know, it's really starting to shift pinkish with the Ursa Mini.
But it seems like the digital noise in that is stronger on the C200 than it is on the Ursa Mini.
Definitely stronger. And then we will go to -4 stops.
I mean, when we get to this point, the C200 is alive.
Yeah,
you know?
very.
It is interesting though. The color seems like it hasn't shifted too badly on the C200, whereas we got a lot of magenta with the Ursa Mini.
Yeah, I feel like the overall tonality of the C200 image is more consistent, but the noise is worse. So I don't know. It seems to me the dynamic range might kind of even out between the two. The C200 likes to be overexposed more. Whereas the Ursa Mini likes to be underexposed a little bit more to hold it together. Okay, our ISO test here. We're going to start at 400 ISO, which is below native for both these cameras, so they should both be pretty clean at this. The images actually look really similar in this studio setting.
They certainly do.
Nothing remarkable.
Nothing remarkable. Well, nice images on both of them. Color-wise, they're very similar too. It's interesting.
800 ISO now. Man, that is extremely clean on the C200. Like, there is no grain.
Yeah.
800 ISO. The Ursa Mini Pro 2, you do see a little bit of grain in like the purple chip and the blue chip on the left. That I didn't quite see with the C200, but obviously still super clean. 800.
Yeah, very clean.
1600 ISO. This is where theoretically we'll start to see some differences. Still super clean.
I was gonna say 1600 ISO looks really good.
Still really. I feel like this maybe has as much noise as 800 did on the Ursa Mini. The Ursa Mini is definitely getting more noise here in the shadows. I also feel like the colors are starting to wash out a bit more.
Boy, they're still, but this is not terrible for 1600.
No, totally usable.
You know,
yeah,
absolutely.
And then we have 3200. I do see more noise now, but I still feel like it's a stop cleaner.
It's really a decent picture.
Very
of 3200.
Yeah, very clean.
I mean, the transitions from the highlights to the blacks are still very clean. And
the Ursa Mini Pro 2 is definitely a lot greener and kind of faded at this point and more noisy.
Yeah.
The C200 does go to 1600 ISO, or 6400 ISO, I should say. And yeah, not bad. I mean, it's kind of crazy how good that is.
It really is. Well, and having a C200, I would definitely push the ISO before I would let it be underexposed.
Yeah, before you push the footage. Yeah, absolutely. So comparing these two cameras head to head, what do you think?
Boy, I think the C200 is a pretty clear winner here. I mean, it handles pushing that ISO. You don't get anything until you get into 3200, which is fabulous. Yeah. Whereas the Ursa Mini Pro 2 it starts to shift at 16 to 32.
I also thought, and what's cool about this is the C200 did better with the highlights, I think, which means if you're shooting, so let's say you're going to be shooting a documentary, because both these cameras are pretty well suited to that. So shooting a documentary on C200 and you're shooting out in the sunlight, it's going to do a little better than the Ursa Mini Pro 2 does. But then if you need to shoot low light, you can push that ISO. So it's kind of like the perfect combo for the documentary stuff.
The one that was disappointing to me was when you underexpose it. It fell apart pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And of course, we didn't have two of those to look at.
Yeah.
But by the time we caught up with it at -3 stops, it was in trouble. So part of the problem you have with the C200, though, is a problem it has always had from birth, and that is that you either have a really dumbed-down codec on SD cards, or you've got a really high, on CFast cards, you've got a raw format.
Right.
Which, if you're going to shoot on raw, if you're going to do a documentary or something with a C200, then you've got to have a lot of raw cards. And I know people who are doing it, and they just buy a ton of cards.
Of CFast cards.
Yeah, you know, and you'll run through them in a hurry. So I think that's a downside and an expense.
Yeah. On that same note, too, it just doesn't have, you know, the EVF solution for the Blackmagic camera is so simple. It's proprietary. It latches right onto the body. That camera's very easily shoulder mounted. And you have, I don't know, the Ursa Mini Pro 2 has a really nice form factor to it that the C200 is kind of lacking.
Yeah, you don't like trying to get rigs and things on it. It's just this small little box.
But then that's also the advantage of the C200 is that you don't, you know, if you're not looking to put it on your shoulder necessarily, then it can be a really small, lightweight camera that's easy to use. So, oh, and also it has better high-speed options. You know, you can shoot up to 120 frames per second in 4K. You know, you can only shoot up to 16 4K on the C200. So,
yeah,
that's something.
Boy, so you could talk yourself into either one of these, you know? And that's the thing about these cameras. The picture quality on all of these cameras is so good that it's just really what do you like, what do you prefer, and the other options that come with it, like codecs available, like form factor. All those things start to come into play as to exactly what do you like. So there you have it. The Ursa Mini Pro G2. Great offering by Blackmagic, and the C200. A little older camera, but certainly one that comes head-to-head with the Ursa Mini Pro G2. So, if you're going to get one of these cameras, get it through our affiliate program. Support us here at the Slanted Lens. Check out our Facebook, Instagram, all those things. We'll keep that great information coming. So keep those cameras rolling.
And keep on clicking.